Welcome to From Loneliness to Overflow with Matina. I'm your host, a holistic healing coach, divorce recovery coach, and a passionate advocate for personal growth and your guide on the journey to healing. This podcast is for those who are struggling with the feelings of loneliness, disconnection, feeling stuck, and who are ready to discover their inner potential and live a life overflowing with love and connection. Inside, we are going to explore the path from pain to transformation, bridging the gap between loneliness and abundance through heartfelt conversations, spirituality, energy work, and self-awareness. So let's get started on this soulful journey together. Welcome to another episode From Loneliness to Overflow with Matina. Today's guest is one who speaks to young minds, one who listens to her own essence, as well as shares her wisdom with the world. And I can't wait for you to learn more and get to know Sherri more. So welcome, Sherri.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
It's absolutely an honor for me as well. I am excited and also very curious like a child. To understand what your journey is about and how things have been unfolding for you. But before we step into that component of the storytelling, if you will, please introduce yourself for our guest.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Sherri Beckerson. I'm an elementary school teacher who I like to say has turned holistic health coach and mind-body practitioner. I use somatic breathwork, so I'm a somatic breathwork facilitator. But I really love bringing people back home to their bodies. That's really been my biggest change. So for me, that's the heart behind what I do, is helping people get out of their heads, get back to their body, and really cultivate a safety and a connection within. So my company's called Ever Present Holistics, and I just help with nervous system regulation and really bringing and cultivating that safety and connection back within. Because I just believe so deeply that when we are better connected to ourselves, we can be better connected to each other.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. It is a very profound experience when you get to love yourself fully and completely for not the way that you look, but the way that you feel when you look into a mirror and the way that you show up.
Yes, exactly.
That is so profound. And honestly, Sherri, as many, we go on these journeys because there's a story to tell and a hardship that we have gone through ourselves as well. So my question to you really truly is, what was your disconnection or loneliness moment that led you into the overflow that you're living today?
It's a good question. And I love the word disconnection, because I think that's been my biggest revelation throughout my life is I didn't know how disconnected I really was, really, until I would even say in the last 5 years, really understanding that at the level that I do today. But yeah, I think I like anyone, we all have a life story. So things start very young. I'm very passionate about inner child and understanding, the origins of things. How something starts is often how something may end, I like to say. So I think going and unpacking the beginning is really important. And when I look at my life story and what kind of brought me along, I know I was born into a family, very loving in many aspects, but lots of chaos. So my nervous system, for example, was really born into survival. And I was in a constant state of survival due to a lot of, conflict within the home, which then led me into a lot of different types of relationships and, throughout my life that weren't necessarily healthy. And then coming into teenage years and coming into early adult, it was really the death of my dad. So my dad actually died 21 years ago. Of a sudden heart attack. And then it was the death of my brother. That was not even a year later. It will actually be 20 years for him tomorrow, which is wild that we're doing this. Just because, 20 years. Well, 20 years ago, I would never, even have thought that I'd be sitting here right now, let alone having this conversation. So it's aligning well to just be speaking of this disconnect that truly I was, and loneliness and the level of grief that took over my life at a really young age. So for my brother Gordy, we were in a car accident. He was visiting me out west. We were in a car accident while he was out there, and he did pass at the accident scene. So I carried a lot of grief, of course, due to his passing in general, but I also carried a lot of guilt and shame around how he passed. I really blamed myself because he was there visiting me. I couldn't save him. And it was actually my boyfriend at the time who was driving the vehicle, and he fell asleep at the wheel. So that put us into the accident. Gordy wasn't wearing a seatbelt. There was just so many levels of, I felt like I truly felt the narrative in my head was my life took his. And that sat with me for, I would say, at least a decade. My first 10 years after losing him was very disconnected, very lonely, but also I was someone that felt it was interesting, the narratives when you think back, but I was someone who felt like I was sad enough alone, so I don't want to be sad when I'm with people. So I carried it all inwardly. And when I was with people, I used alcohol a lot to do that. But when I was out with people, it was more about them and a tuning outward, which when you think of my childhood, that's who I was. I was the people pleaser. I was the peacemaker. So attuning to other people and disconnecting from self was so natural and normal to me already. So it actually, I mean, it was my protective. It was the way I was able to stay safe and grounded to an extent in my, my grief and when I was going through that, which that story I would say is at least 10 years long, where there was so much disconnect from self. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of just escapism, just really not wanting to feel. Running and escaping from my reality was, I was petrified of my own reality. And that led to whether it was escaping through alcohol or just different relationships, even overachieving or trying to always be doing something. I was like, now it was, I kind of called it at some point, maybe 2 or 3 years after, was like my fight to live moment. And I was, this was going back to school, and I was going to honor their lives properly, and I was going to just make sure things. So just always living kind of enslaved to the fact that this thing happened, but trying to not feel it, but also navigate it, whether it was for the better or for me just escaping it, not feeling it, which then led me to, I'd say, into my one of the biggest changes in my 30s that started to lead me, I would say, to connection was my faith. I started to go to a church, and I just kind of started to see there was something different about these people as I was there. And as I was, it's a Christian non-denominational church. And I had never really given religion. To me, religion was very like boxy and about rules and regulations. And there was a disconnect in itself there. And I never understood it. So as I started to go here, I started to just learn what I believe now is, a relationship with God. And I really started to just connect in that level at a spiritual level. And that started to give me a safety to start to feel and to start to forgive. That's the biggest one. It was in those early 30s that I started to truly forgive myself. And I remember there was specific times and prayers and things that happened at that time that I finally, the thing I thought I would live with forever, which was that my life took his, and just this guilt I would have to just carry. I truly don't carry that anymore. And I see it in such, God's ways are higher, and just like heaven's higher than the earth, that scripture really sticks to me. And it really helped me in navigating that and forgiveness of myself with my life and, Gordy's. Because I always either thought, I should either be with him or it should have been me, or it was always just in like complete rejection of what had happened. I couldn't hold space for what was. I just thought it shouldn't have been that way, right?
I'm getting chills. I'm so sorry for the way things happened.
Thank
Not
you.
only with your dad, but especially also with your brother. And it's a very heavy emotion behind even the words my life.
Yeah.
Right. And carrying that frequency, that heavy backpack on your shoulder every single day,
Yeah.
it is unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad that you found the connection back to you and in and around forgiveness, especially because forgiveness its own is so many people still think that forgiveness is for another person. It's not. Yet I would love to hear your thoughts of how did you forgive? How did you tap into that frequency, and what did that do for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was just having this conversation last night about forgiveness and why I choose to forgive. It's been an unfolding, like I said, coming into Christianity, learning the Word of God, learning I think it's more the nature of God. Like I said, it's a relationship. So it's learning this nature and understanding. And I mean, in the Bible, it talks about, we forgive, He first forgave us, right? And so forgiveness to me slowly started to become just this understanding that I guess we're in need of it. Everybody's in need of forgiveness, and I am in a constant need of it. But to truly show myself forgiveness, it was more understanding that I'm not big enough. That was actually how it came to me. I'm not like the way I want. It was almost like when I wanted to act like believe that my life took his. It was almost like that's still an act of control, like that I think I'm in such control. And so this forgiveness also came from really a surrender of I'm not in control and my life. I am not big enough to have orchestrated such a thing. And so it was humbling at the core of it all of, and then it was freeing and it was releasing and it was like, wow. And I think that's that difference between, and even holding grudges. It's like the more we hold a grudge towards somebody or the more we think we're like, well, I can't point the finger. You know, that saying where they're like, you point the finger, but you have three pointing back at yourself. It's like that judgment, that aggression, that anger towards it really is just a reflection of, what's inward. And for me to forgive self, I have more capacity to forgive others because we can't give what we don't have. And so that's been also a big thing for me is that I've really understood in this last, I'd say 10 years is just how I'm treating myself is going to become a reflection of what I'm going to be giving out. And whether it's, that spirit, that energy, whatever we are holding, we are then, giving. And that's that co-regulation in the nervous system. Spiritually speak, there's so many levels to that, but I want to be able to, hold space for what is now because of how badly I couldn't before, but then also give what I believe God gives us every single day, which is, forgiveness.
And
Hopefully that made sense. It was like going in circles, but
great, it is great. For those listeners who don't believe in God, it can be a frequency, it can be anything. And it doesn't matter to me, this is the way I look at it, as to what religion or background you belong to. It is my belief that we're all praying and connecting with only one source and one frequency that is all encompassing, it's all love, that is all about that higher awareness of self and letting go of the human conditions.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I actually had that conversation recently too of like a lot of people, again, what happens in religion is everyone wants to be right. And it's, I've come to like, I don't need to be right. I don't need people to believe what I believe. And how I share it with others and what the question I like to offer for others is just, where do you draw your hope from? And I just encourage people to get very clear on that just because, I mean, the world we live in, the way, like, how the rug can be torn from you underneath you and life can change on a dime. And so that was something I had no idea back in those days with where I drew any hope from. I didn't believe in a God. I didn't believe in anything. I just thought the world was now this big, scary, negative, crazy place where really bad things happen and then you have to just deal with them. And now, that's such a different perspective I have. Even going through, so forward now, I've now gone through a divorce through my since the death and just the way I've dealt with both of those things, which both lead to grief, of course, death of a marriage, death of a relationship. I dealt with that in such a very different way. Yes, of course, I'm stronger because of what I've already gone through, but on the same level, I went through this with my faith and knowing where I drew my hope from and not just leaning on myself and not just it not just being this self-generated, like I can do it willpower. It really, really changed things for me. So I just feel like that's a really good question to answer and get connected with for anyone, whether regardless of what your believing is just, where do you really draw your hope from?
It is so wise to ask yourself a question because when you have that clarity, you can always go back to it. You can always receive wisdom, receive hope, receive whatever you need to receive in that beautiful moment. And
Yeah.
Sherri, one thing you shared about the difference when your brother passed and there was such a heaviness and disconnection and not knowing where the hope was coming from, going through that experience, even though it's been now close to, or tomorrow it will be exactly 2 decades. The first part of the decade, it wasn't easy. It was fully disconnected. It was fully like pushing that blame upon yourself. And then the last decade has been about releasing and letting go of that. And now that you've gone through a different type of, yes, relationship ending is a grief process. And some days can be as easy, and other days, months down the line, years down the line, can be so heavy. And there's no specific timeline for grief. In this component of life, though, you went through it with the knowing where your hope was coming from. And that is the biggest distinction within both experiences, even though they're both completely different reasoning, different whatevers. But the essence in you shifted drastically. And in the beginning, you mentioned how important it is to be connected to our bodies. So when you now have your clarity as to where your hope comes from, how did the connection to your own body came to be?
So that's, I think, the most beautiful thing, because it's come from starting with fitness to really moving into the breath and like every single breath we take. But definitely started and began with fitness through the, divorce. It was more about me being just disciplined and turning my fitness journey into understanding my body much more, and really understanding health in general, holistic health, looking at the mind, body, spirit, knowing we need to feed ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. So really getting aligned in that area of the whole person and all of me, which then led me into taking my holistic life, and it's called the Holistic Life and Nutrition Diploma. With it had a mind body practitioner diploma, or department of it, compartment. And that was my favorite part of it, because it helped me really understand the body in a whole new way. And that's where I truly fell in love with the nervous system, and really just understanding nervous system regulation in a whole new way, because really I've been working with dysregulated nervous systems my whole life, it feels like. Because when I said I grew up with chaos in the home, to going into, my elementary school teaching, I was a child and youth worker before that, an educational assistant, and then went into teaching. I've always worked with a lot of the higher needs kids. Even I'm choosing a role right now as a teacher in part of our spec ed that's called Excellence in Social Learning. So I'm working with the highest needs kids that are, having a lot of dysregulation. So dysregulation has been just a big part of my journey in general. So yeah, connecting to understanding how I've been dysregulated, and to how to regulate the body in general, which then brought me into, trauma and emotional freedom. So that's been a big part of this last 10 years, is how can I hold space now for things? How can I face things head on? That's the difference between Gordy, say, and my dad dying, to my divorce. Was this time it wasn't about escaping. I was like, I'm not escaping this. I am hitting this head on. That was the determined, that was my choice at that point. I am going to be hitting this head on. And then that went into my discoveries of more of holistic health, like I said, now into the nervous system, and then into somatic breath work, where trauma release, emotional freedom release, and the experience I was having as I was going through, before even deciding to become a facilitator, the experience I was having with just me breathing and my breath and going through a somatic journey was just undeniable. I've had experiences that have led me in like super elevated states, and then also experiences that I have had some very deep rooted cries or like movement in the body that I didn't have a connection to what that was all about. And then others where I've had actual memories. Like I've had one breathwork journey, one of my first ones, I was at the accident scene. And there was a lot of healing that went on in that, because the body keeps the score. So now I'm very much more aware of that. And the breath is this beautiful bridge that can bridge, that mind, body, and heal.
What would you say, though, for the listeners who don't truly understand the nervous system and how to regulate, or understand even the difference between a regulated and dysregulated nervous system?
Yeah.
How do you explain it?
Well, so I think a lot of us live in dysregulation. A lot of us, without even knowing it, we breathe very shallow. We're breathing from our chest. We're staying in a heightened state. The society we live in, especially here in North America, we are designed to just be completely distracted and disconnected and always going. So we're staying in that survival state. So just understanding what it feels like to be in a sympathetic state, which is that fight or flight energy, and starting to understand and know what fight energy feels like. What does flight energy feel like? And then understanding parasympathetic, so helping people to understand what does that mean to feel your calm, rest, and digest. This is where we can heal. So you can't heal when we're in states of survival, right? So we want to be able, the nervous system is the stress response system is meant to be that beautiful teeter-totter that brings you from stress, you go back and you go into the sets of calm. But where we're at today, we are living in constant states of stress, constant states of, and our nervous system is not going into those states of calm. We're having more chronic disease, so much inflammation. There's just so much happening. And stress is this silent, sometimes silent, that it's like, listen to this whispers of the body before they become screams. And that, I think, is just a powerful way of looking at understanding. There's the body's whispering, the body is communicating, the body is speaking. And it's when we can, one, understand, but then have the tools to actually bring ourselves into more regulated. Whether you're using, it's like upregulated breathing, which maybe you're asking for sympathetic energy, you're asking for some, maybe instead of reaching for coffee, which a lot of people get mad at me for when I'm like, don't drink coffee. But that upregulated breath can bring you some sympathetic energy instead of, having those like lulls when you're feeling tired. Then maybe a balanced breathing when you just need to just be more balanced again and bring your body into a state of calm. And then that down regulation when you really need to be reset and your body needs to feel safe. Because I think that is the number one thing I realized was after my divorce and coming in, as I had never felt truly safe in my body. My body was in a constant state of survival, I think from the womb. So it was this last 5 years of really, really connecting all of those dots, really connecting back to my body. I would never even have said yes to speak on a podcast. I would never be leading breathwork sessions. I wouldn't be doing the things that I do today if I were still in this dysregulated and disconnected state. So just helping people become safe, because when we're really operating from safety, we're operating from connection, we're able to operate from the highest frequency, which is authenticity. And that is who you're truly meant to be. And so to help people connect with that is really my heart of what I want to do in this life.
What I'm really hearing is in the moment where you notice that shallow breath, take a moment to breathe deeply.
100%.
Is there a little breath exercise that you would recommend the listeners to help them really regulate and get into the moment that they're in?
Yeah, I love doing this one. I do it at the beginning of if I'm doing talks or anything. But the physiological sigh, Andrew Huberman, he talks about it a lot, so some of your listeners may know that. But the physiological sigh is 2 nostril breaths. And the first one is a full breath through the nostril. And then it's like you're doing a sip at the top. So you're going full in and then sip. And then you're letting it out aloud or like with a vocal sigh. And if you want your exhale to always elongate the inhale. So you're letting it out for a longer period of time. And that in itself is going to reset you. You can change your physiology within one breath. So you do that 3 times. I'll tell you, because I am someone who runs late. It's one of my worst qualities. I got to work on that still, because it does put my nervous system in fight or flight. So when I leave to go to work, for example, and I get to my elevator, I really will do 3 of those. I can get 3 in before I get to the bottom. And I'm walking out of the elevator in a different state, because I'm like going to the elevator being like, did I get everything? Do I have everything I got to do? And then I'm leaving the elevator like, okay, reset, and kind of use that, doorway as the step to the next thing with a more calm, relaxed.
I love breathwork.
Yeah.
Breathwork is, like you said, right? We're in a world where we always go, go, go.
Yeah.
We have to actually get to
yes.
take that pause and be like, let's go deeper here.
Yeah. I love that you use that, because I think those little shifts of like, I have to I get to are huge when it comes to just the language we use about it. But that's where, like, for me, ever present. So holistics, obviously, the holistic health, but ever present that's exactly what I think we are missing. We live again, when we live so dominated in the mind, connected to our emotion, we're running from this. I always talk to my breathwork clients as, an iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg was that 5% consciousness that we have. But that subconscious layer of ourselves is 95%. And we truly live from that 95%. We live from the defenses, the ways that we've operated from childhood. And that often is kind of losing my train where I was headed on that one. But the iceberg is where, we often live from that subconscious layer. And if we don't make that subconscious conscious, then we're going to be operating out of script, and we're going to be operating out of patterns that were maybe never chosen. Maybe we didn't, choose those patterns. They were handed to us, maybe they're just distorted thinking that we have received, because as children, we're always, especially if we were experiencing neglect or experiencing abuse, or there was abuse in the home, you're always going to a child is always going to take it on themselves, right? The child will always think it's about them. So the child will hate themselves before they ever hate their parents. And that child, when there's disconnection in that safety, and there's disconnection, and they can't be then their authentic selves. And so we gain all of these scripts and these programs, and we start to believe, and then the next thing you believe, well, I'm just an anxious person, or I'm just, that I'm a people pleaser, and that's just how it is. And you start to label yourself, and soon these defenses have become your personality. And what was adaptive as a child truly becomes maladaptive as an adult. And then you are disconnected from your own authenticity because you're living from the distorted conditioning of your childhood. And as humans, we will always pick a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. So we want and need that, which is why discomfort. Yes.
Thought control component as to why we do what we do, or we say we want something else, but we're still stuck in the doing of the regular things that we know.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of what I was going back to, the presence of, like, the present moment. And we're so identified with the mind. We're so identified that we are living in either the regrets of the past, or the, fears of the future, or whatever. And we're missing the only actual tangible thing we have, which is the present moment. And I believe we meet God's presence in the present. And so when we can be present, we're actually so much less reactive, able to hold space for what is, like I said, where I couldn't do that for so long. And this is where we can actually hold space for things that do suck. We can hold space for things that are painful. And then we can also not be attached to that it always has to be this way, right? So if we're living in a season where we're, like, very excited and we've been getting all these blessings, and we're not attached to the fact it's always going to be that way. And therefore there's no real surprises that, love and sorrow, joy and sorrow are this beautiful thing that life is giving us at all times. So presence helps us hold space for all things. And the more we can get connected with that. I don't know if you're familiar with the farmer and the horse analogy. It's like called the Chinese farmer. But long story short, it's the farmer and the boy. When the farmer's son comes home and, brings a horse home, and the neighbors come over and they're like, "Oh my God, it's so exciting. You have a new horse." And the farmer's like, "Maybe." And then the next day the gates open and the horse runs away, and the farmers, I'm kind of like shortening this, and there's different ones, but you'll get the idea of, the horse runs away, neighbors come over. "Oh, that's so sad. The horse ran away." Maybe. The farmer responds with a maybe. And then the next day, the horse comes back with 2 horses, and it's like, "Oh, you're so lucky. The horse came out." And he's like, "Maybe." And then there's just this constant, like, there's a good thing that happens in our limited thinking, right? And then there's this bad thing that happens. And I quote those good and bad because we want to label and we want to be in control of. But the farmer is responding with this maybe. And I think that is being able to be present without having to make things and force things to be what you want them to be, right? So you're living, and it's not to say you shouldn't have expectation, you shouldn't go after dreams, and you shouldn't be disappointed at times. That's all part of the human experience. But when we can live unattached, but also, jiving in the things that we want, I just always find that as like a good picture of presence. And if that makes sense.
power word. As we said, from
Mm.
have to get.
Yes,
Same thing.
exactly.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
not right or wrong. It's a maybe.
yeah, yeah,
And you get
right?
to be in this gray area where it's like both can coexist.
Yeah, the duality of it. And I think that's where it's at, where if we can live in the duality that life offers, then we are going, and that's where presence can be, the being present within yourself. And then you can do that with each other. Because a lot of the time when we're with each other, we're either trying to be heard or we're trying to be right. And this is what causes so much conflict, wars. We see it going on all the time. And it's just this constant fight to be right or to be, heard, where yeah, when we can, hold space for each other, we can hold space for our own. That's the thing. We're always mirroring each other as well. So the deeper, like I said from the beginning, the more connected and, we can be to ourselves, we truly will be able to do that with each other. And I think that will help make a better world at the end of the day.
Only that, it will help you yourself to get a better perspective and let go of the heavy backpack. Our mind seeks control.
Yes.
But what I also heard is as you went through your own breathwork experiences personally, some of them were very defined, where you could go back and see the exact scenario, feel what you felt, shift what you need to shift, heal what you need to heal. But there were also moments where it was undefined. There was an emotion, maybe of anxiety or maybe of something else that was present, but you couldn't identify exactly what was happening.
I think that's the beauty.
Because it pressures you, literally pressure, pushing pressure us to let go. The story is not what we need, it's the awareness of the emotion that we need.
Yes. And that's one of the biggest things is like for my breath work, what we had talked about is like a bottoms up approach when I went through my facilitation. And I always felt that he did a really good job of just giving the example that, when we're in the body, we are a body first. So somatically speaking, when we have instincts first, he uses the analogy of someone breaking into a house. So he says, when someone breaks into your house, you react first, your instinct first. You are having a fight, flight, freeze response. Something's coming out of you. You then have an emotion attached to how that responded in you. So if you had a fight energy and you kicked the guy out of the house and he left, that emotion might be like, pride. And and then that then takes you to your story. And your story then tells you, okay, I can do anything. Maybe, but if you had maybe a flight energy and you went and hid, then that emotion attached to that could be anxiety, fear. And your story could be, the world's not safe. And so if you think about the body in this capacity and the amount of experiences we've gone through, especially as young children and then all the way up, and we've had all of these experiences and instinctual responses that then gave us emotions that were really never properly probably held because generationally emotion hasn't really been prioritized or held to be. And then the story comes from that. You can see where a lot of confusion and a lot of disconnection comes because we've created an emotion and the story is now coming from. But when we can be back in the body, trauma doesn't have to be re-experienced. This was my biggest thing why I call it therapy without words, is because trauma doesn't have to be relived. It just has to be willing to be felt. And often Gabor Mate, I love his work, and he talks a lot about this, is just that, it's not about what necessarily happened to you, it's about what happened within you based on what happened to you. And a lot of the time we just didn't have a safe, empathetic witness. We didn't have it held. We weren't able, whether we weren't able to communicate it to even allow someone to know that we were hurting, or a parent was disconnected themselves and they didn't know how to hold space for your emotions. Whatever it was, there wasn't safety and connection at the time you needed it. So then that response became the emotion, whatever you had. And then that emotion then told you the story. And now you are living dominated by your story that you believe to be true. And if your brain is always looking to validate what you believe is true, right? Because it's trying to keep you safe. So that's why that familiar hell is going to feel safer. Where I felt for years in a dysfunctional relationship in many aspects, I was safer there to an extent due to a lot of different things. But there was a safety about it because it was so familiar. So I felt a lot more uncomfortable, which is why I also think breathwork is very important, not only to the connection, but it is to push you. We say find your edge and push just beyond. So to push you just outside your comfort zone too. And so I like things like ice tubs, for example, and going into the ice baths and just really learning to regulate, put yourself in purposeful stress and then regulate. And then fun fact, so for the first 10 years when my brother passed, I did jump out of an airplane on the day he died, just for my own, I was like, it's my leap of faith. It's my own, way of just jumping out, kind of like not knowing how to deal with this thing. And then I did that for the first 10 years. And then on the 15th year anniversary, I did it again. And now tomorrow I am doing it again, but I have a surprise to myself, which is so cool. My mom, my mom has grown so much. Like I swear her 60s are going to be the best years of her life. She has grown so much. I'm so proud of her in this last, 3 years. And just changed so much of how she is. And I would say she's definitely lived in a lot of boxes, a lot of limits, and a lot of I can't do those because. And in this last 3 years with just, different community and people she's met, and she's changed her life. And when she told me, not even long ago, last week, she was going to jump from the airplane with me, I was like, first I was scared, to be honest. I'm like, wait a minute, you've always told me you can't do this. Can you do this? And I'm like, but recently in the last couple of days, we booked yesterday. I was like, no, if she's wanting to do this, this is a freedom right now for her. This is next level. Let's do this. So, I mean, God willing, tomorrow we're jumping from an airplane and I'm really excited about it.
I'm excited for both of you. And what a blessing you are being blessed upon. And she is being blessed upon to not only grow together and have that experience together, but also know. And that's a knowing. It's not logical. It's just a knowing and a feeling inside that there has been breakthroughs made.
Yes.
I love this for you and your mom, Sherri. I can't wait to hear how that goes. Please do let me know.
I will. Thank you so much.
I'm so good. There's a little ritual we have on this podcast, Sherri, where I ask you a question that the previous guest has left.
Okay.
And the question I have for you today is, have you forgiven yourself and let go of everything that had you holding down?
That's a good question. I think the answer I can say is truthfully yes. And it's funny because I just had this conversation last night, and I say, I like to treat people based on who I am, not who they are. And so for me, I value forgiveness. I value forgiveness because of obviously my belief in God and the Bible and what it tells me and what I've truly learned, but also what I've experienced from it. And I truly believe, He first forgives us, and if He offers me forgiveness every day, then it really is the only thing that I can do back. And so I think, I truly have forgiven myself. And it's really beautiful to be able to say that and truly feel it, because 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 7, 6, I wouldn't have been able to say yes confidently to that answer. So it's kind of nice. So thank you for that question.
I always love how these kind of questions are connected to the conversation we just had before.
Yeah, it's good.
Such a beautiful blessing to even hold the space for that. Thank you so much for sharing so authentically and sharing your struggles that led into serving people. And for anyone who feels inspired to connect with Sherri, look into the description. All her links are there. Reach out, connect, and really allow yourself to be given that gift of presence, of breath, and really come into being who you are.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. It's been a great conversation. I can't wait to hear what the listeners think about it. What you shared, Sherri, I really want to touch upon this before I end the recording, is very painful because grief has no logic. Grief has no end time or goal time.
Yeah.
It comes and goes and comes and goes. Even sometimes when we're like, okay, I got this, I'm over it.
Yeah.
It hit you again. And
absolutely.
It's honoring the one who have passed on, and it's honoring yourself even more in that moment.
Yeah.
Tomorrow is not only a big day because you and your mom are jumping from a plane, but it's also a Remembrance Day where you both get to honor the essence of your brother.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you for tuning in, everyone. Till next time. Thank you for listening. I hope this episode has helped you to feel less alone in finding tools towards a life which is overflowing with love and purpose. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to reach more individuals who are seeking healing and personal growth just like you. And don't forget to take a screenshot and share your aha moments on your Instagram stories and tag me, Singh Matina. See you next week. Take care.